World War I changed the world's outlook on war and on life. Economies throughout Europe were destroyed due to the costs of war and later the Great Depression. Total war had emerged and resulted in the highest number of casualties in Europe. Dictatorships were on the rise. Citizens within Europe began to question everything in their past lives. Yet this age of anxiety from 1919 to 1939 was a positive cultural turning point in European history. It brought new and revised modes of thought and philosophy, such as existentialism and Freudian psychology. Tremendous progress was also made in the field of science as new physics emerged with groundbreaking discoveries. As European societies worked to cope with the uncertainty of the world around them, the arts underwent dramatic changes as people sought new ways to express themselves. Perhaps the most significant and positive development of the Age of Anxiety, though, was the arrival of consumerism.
Faced with feelings of fear, confusion, and stress, European societies began to search for new explanations as to why the human life was filled with such hardships. Suddenly, everyday life was filled with uncertainty and doubt. What was the purpose and meaning of life? The philosophy of existentialism sought to answer this, gaining popularity in the 20th century. Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher in the mid-19th century, is considered the father of existentialism. He asserted that the highest task for human beings is to become oneself in an ethical and religious sense. This is a question that nearly all people struggle with and seek to answer to this day, and it's much more challenging than many assume. In Europe during the 1920s and 1930s, it fostered creativity and forced people to think for themselves and challenge what they knew, resulting in mind-blowing changes in the arts, such as Viennese composer Arnold Schoenberg's abandonment of traditional harmony and tonality in favor of 12-tone music. In order for societies to move forward and develop, pushing people outside of their comfort zone is important but not necessarily easy nor welcomed. Along with Kierkegaard, other existentialists, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, came to the conclusion that the meaning of life is sought through individual choices, free will, and personal freedom. Existentialism supports the quality of virtue because it teaches that the individual has the ability to shape his or her own life. It is essential that an individual live a unique and genuine life while also searching for moral values in an uncertain world. Desiring greater morals is beneficial to all societies and creates optimism about the power of the individual. There is a therapeutic value to existential analysis because it frees people from the delusions and harsher of daily life while also encouraging individuality. Let's look to Jean-Paul Sartre with his belief that for humans, existence precedes essence. He said, "We mean that man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and defines himself afterwards." How inspirational! No tradition, nor government, nor culture can define us unless we allow it to.
Just as existentialism grew in popularity during the 20th century as a result of problems faced by the individual, so did Freudian psychology.
Freud thought too much importance was given to rationality and morality by Western societies. In 1918, he published Civilization and Die Weltanschauung, and in it he discussed how reason was thought to unite men and control their emotions. He claimed, however, that human behavior is irrational and governed by the unconscious. If the id, the primitive, irrational, powerful, and unconscious part of our psyche, is not kept in check by the superego and the ego, then individuals and societies are in constant danger of the aggressive desires of the id. In order to help prevent such occurrences, Freud developed psychoanalysis, which works to help us better understand human behavior. It allows people to talk through their problems, something that would be beneficial to those dealing with the destruction of world wars. He offered people the opportunity to uncover the root source of their dysfunction, so that they could heal and live better in the future.
Today, we still see many positives that have come as a result of Freudian psychology. Many psychodynamic principles play important roles in the development of relationships between clients and therapists. One of the main reasons that Freudian psychology gained support during the 1920s was because of the groundbreaking developments in the field of physics. Ernest Rutherford deserves much of the credit for the breakthroughs made during the 1920s. In 1919, he split the atom. One development that cannot be overlooked is the identification of the neutron. The atomic bomb would not have been possible without an understanding of the force of the chain reactions to which neutrons are essential. New information about subatomic particles continued to grow, with the uncertainty principle among the most shocking, formulated by German physicist Werner Heisenberg in 1927. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle states that the more precisely the position of a subatomic particle is determined, the less precisely the momentum is known in this instant, and vice versa. This is confusing and vague, and for an average European citizen during the Age of Anxiety, it was rather discomforting knowing that nature is ultimately unknowable and unpredictable. Despite the resistance the new principles and theories faced, our world today wouldn't have progressed to where it is without these fantastic developments. And in many ways, it was the unnerving breakthroughs in physics that led people to revisit Freudian psychology and to seek escape in the arts.
Literature, visual arts, and music all experienced radical changes during the Age of Anxiety. The arts were coping mechanisms for dealing with the destruction of the First World War, shattered economies, and new scientific information. During the early to mid-1900s, there was a general intellectual climate of pessimism, relativism, and alienation, which was expressed in the arts. Marcel Proust, a French novelist and one of the most phenomenal literary figures of the 20th century, used the first-person narrator to confront the problems of the world.
Literature became very personal during the Age of Anxiety. Authors such as Virginia Woolf and James Joyce were fans of the stream of consciousness technique, which uses internal monologue to explore the human psyche. This technique uses both the internal and external pressures on an individual. Our literary world today would not be the same without stream of consciousness or first-person narrator, both of which basically emerged as a result of the Age of Anxiety.
Many authors of this period were distressed by progress, as works such as James Joyce's Ulysses demonstrate. However, the visual arts actually rejected many long-accepted methods and ideas in favor of modernism. In architecture, functionalism became the focus. Modernism was a beneficial move for societies that were suffering economically because it focused on what was practical and avoided excess. And yet aesthetically, the structures were still fresh and original.
It is easy to associate the arts of the 1920s with dark imagery and a sense of individual suffering. But the Bauhaus actually united and inspired skilled artists from all over the world. Schools like the Bauhaus encouraged innovative students and artists to express their revolutionary ideas. Art and cultural historian E.H. Gombrich summed it up best when he wrote, "What the painter inquires into is not the nature of the physical world, but the nature of our reactions to it." These reactions are captured in the artistic movements of Impressionism, Expressionism, Dadaism, and Surrealism. The art movements during the 1920s wanted to challenge the bankruptcy of mainstream society and produce radical social change. Artists like Salvador were successful in this. Before the Age of Anxiety, art was calculated and rigid. These movements broke down the accepted social norms for artwork and changed the art world forever. This was true for music as well.
Social and cultural boundaries weren't only challenged by the arts, but by the consumer society that began to emerge in the 1920s. As globalization caused the world to grow more connected, and inexpensive goods were produced in large quantities, everyday life for the common citizen was altered. New appliances like the washing machine simplified household life, and a new woman of independence began to emerge, challenging traditional gender roles. Radios and automobiles increased the modes of communication in the world, while cinema offered citizens an escape from the real world. Consumerism has arguably had the greatest impact on European culture in both the short and long term by bringing societies toward the lifestyles that we know today, filled with many luxuries and useful innovations.